What comes to mind when the word disaster is mentioned? Is it a family Thanksgiving that quickly devolved into political arguments? Or perhaps a botched introduction of a significant other? Maybe it's as simple as choosing the wrong outfit for a special occasion. Natural disasters, often referred to as acts of God, can be even more devastating, affecting a larger number of people. Take, for instance, the 2005 earthquake in Kashmir, which resulted in the deaths of more than 75,000 individuals and the destruction of 90% of all buildings in the city of Balakat. Similarly, the 1931 floods in central China claimed the lives of another 100,000 people, submerging an area equivalent to the entire nation of England beneath raging waters. In 1970, the Hola cyclone struck Bangladesh, causing the loss of lives ranging between 300 to 500,000. Always striving to mimic the powers of God, man-made disasters have inflicted immeasurable suffering on the earth. While oil spills, factory fires, and coal mining accidents may not tally the same death tolls as natural calamities, they occur with alarming frequency. Moreover, true tragedy strikes when natural disasters intersect with human settlements, triggering chain reactions with catastrophic consequences. Consider the 2011 typhoon that struck Fukushima, leading to a partial meltdown of the city's nuclear energy reactor. Similarly, while droughts like the one that devastated Bengal in 1770 are natural phenomena, human-made policies exacerbated the crisis by implementing ineffective relief measures. This mismanagement prolonged the disaster and led to the deaths of between 7 to 10 million people. Individuals themselves can become disasters, as evidenced by men and women who prove inadequate for the tasks bestowed upon them. While it's a common belief that true leaders emerge during times of crisis, not everyone rises to the occasion when faced with adversity. Historical figures like Nero, who famously fiddled while Rome burned, Neville Chamberlain, who pursued appeasement with Hitler, and Henry VIII, whose obsession with siring a male heir led to a tumultuous reign, exemplify this reality. Yet few events in history are deemed outright disasters. One notable exception is the White Ship disaster, a moment that forever altered the course of English history. This tragedy also served as a catalyst for one of the most significant conflicts between supporters of patriarchal authority and advocates of early feminist ideals. You're listening to Empires, Anarchy, and Other Notable Moments, a podcast designed for deep dives that assist in the teaching of history. This series focuses upon Matilda of England. Episode number 2, The White Ship Disaster. While this series primarily revolves around Matilda, it's essential to temporarily place her on the sidelines as events unfold that will ultimately shape her future. At this point in the story, she finds herself in Germany, standing beside her husband Henry, who holds the title of Holy Roman Emperor. Matilda's journey began when she was just a girl, sold off to the highest bidder and sent to be raised in her husband's household at the tender age of 8. Her father, King Henry I of England, the youngest son of William the Conqueror, made this decision after the birth of her younger brother, William Adelin, just 18 months after Matilda's arrival. Despite their youth and potential to produce more heirs, the king and queen halted their marital relations, pinning all of their hopes on their young son, William Adelin. From his earliest years, William was meticulously groomed for rulership. His education was tailored to impart the knowledge and skills necessary to govern his father's kingdom with wisdom and authority. Remarkably, by the tender age of 10, William was already immersed in royal affairs, actively participating in court sessions and affixing his signature to important documents, thus laying the solid foundation for his inevitable ascension to the throne. Amidst the challenges to Henry's rule, particularly the contentious circumstances surrounding his older brother's captivity, William Adelin emerged as a beacon of stability and continuity. His gradual integration into the duties of future kingship saw him garner the loyalty of Norman barons in 1115 and English barons in 1116. Following the passing of his mother in 1118, William Adelin was officially proclaimed as the designated heir to the throne, holding the title of King Designate. Historian Catherine Hanley reflects on this pivotal moment, observing that Henry's strategic vision was unfolding seamlessly. His own reign remained unassailable. His daughter's reputation flourished abroad. His alliances with the Empire and Anjou stood firm. Maine was firmly under his son's control. His illegitimate offspring served his interests diligently, and his adept political maneuvers had ensured a period of stability. However, as history often teaches, periods of calm are inevitably fleeting. In 1113, another pivotal William stepped onto the stage of our narrative. William Clito, the 16-year-old nephew of King Henry, found himself thrust into the complex web of familiar and political intrigue. His father, also named William, had been imprisoned by his own brother, King Henry, adding a layer of familiar tension to the unfolding drama. Fearing the potential threat posed by the young William Clito to his own reign, King Henry ordered the boy's arrest. However, the king's efforts to detain him proved unsuccessful, and William Clito found refuge in Flanders, under the protection of French King Louis VI. At this juncture, Normandy remained a vassal state of France, yet the prospect of a united Normandy under English rule posed a significant challenge to French influence in the region. The argument that William Clito's father, as the rightful Duke of Normandy, should be succeeded by his eldest son in case of incapacity held weight in the political calculations of the time. The potential separation of England from Normandy threatened to weaken both entities, while bolstering the position of the French monarchy. Thus, the fate of William Clito and the political dynamics surrounding Normandy became intertwined with the broader struggle for power and influence in medieval Europe. In 1117, at the age of 14, William Clito found himself at the center of a coalition determined to reclaim his rightful seat as the Duke of Normandy. Remarkably, among Clito's supporters was none other than Fulk of Anjou, whose daughter was betrothed to Henry's heir, William Adelin. This unexpected alignment of interests added layers of complexity to the already intricate political landscape of medieval Europe. The tensions finally erupted into open conflict after 2 years of simmering hostilities, culminating in the Battle of Bermeuil. The clash unfolded unexpectedly, near a nondescript farmstead nestled along the border. In a desperate bid to assert their dominance, Louis VI's forces launched a bold charge against the outnumbered English troops that were loyal to Henry I. However, their initial momentum faltered, and the rugged terrain, coupled with the chaos of close-quarter combat, turned the French cavalry into liabilities rather than assets. The Battle of Bermeuil thus became a brutal melee, with neither side willing to yield ground easily. Amidst the chaos and confusion of the battlefield, the fate of Normandy hung in the balance, as young William Clito fought to reclaim his birthright against formidable odds. Medieval armor was quite remarkable, providing knights with near invulnerable defense on the battlefield. The transition from chainmail to plate armor marked a significant advancement in military technology, offering superior protection against both slashing and piercing attacks. When properly fitted, plate armor rendered knights almost impervious to conventional weapons, turning a battle between them into more of a grueling test of endurance rather than a swift life-or-death struggle. The physical exertion required to maneuver and swing a sword while encased in a mostly airtight suit of metal was immense. Every movement demanded considerable effort, and combatants had to contend with the stifling heat and weight of their armor. In such conditions, finding an opening in the opponent's defenses became paramount. The goal was to exploit any vulnerable seam or weak point in the armor with a precise strike, aiming to incapacitate or immobilize the adversary. Direct blows were often ineffective against plate armor, necessitating strategic tactics to overcome the formidable defense. Knights engaged in battle would seek to dent or dislodge their opponent's armor, inflicting blunt force trauma or causing them to lose balance and fall to the ground. Once downed, the defeated knight could be disarmed and subdued, allowing the victor to carefully probe their armor for weaknesses at their leisure. Despite the ferocity of medieval combat, an unwritten code of chivalry governed the conduct of knights on the battlefield. This honor system dictated that defeated opponents would be spared further harm and could be ransomed for a tidy profit after the fighting ceased. Trust in the integrity of fellow knights ensured that even in the heat of battle, certain principles of fair play and respect were upheld, contributing to the reputation of chivalry as a cornerstone of medieval warfare. Still, medieval warfare remained fraught with peril, and amidst the chaos of battle, even the elements could prove deadly. Credible reports suggest that in some instances, it wasn't enemy lances or arrows that posed the greatest threat to knights, but rather lightning strikes. However, the more common and insidious killer on the battlefield was heat stroke, claiming the lives of many elite warriors who fought encased in heavy armor beneath the scorching sun. The Battle of Brumel, the pivotal engagement in 1119, exemplified the hazards of medieval combat. Despite its relatively short duration of just 1 hour, the toll on the combatants was significant. Out of 140 French knights engaged in the battle, a staggering number were captured, far outnumbering the few who perished in the fray. King Louis, known by the epithet the Fat, personally took part in the fighting, but was ultimately unseated from his horse. The rout was so complete that both King Louis and William Clito were compelled to flee the battlefield on foot, bereft of their mounts. Yet amidst the chaos of battle, moments of chivalry and camaraderie could still emerge. William Adelin, recognizing the plight of his cousin William Clito, who had lost his horse, graciously sent one back to him as a gesture of goodwill and kinship. Historian Charles Spencer reflects on the significance of the Battle of Brumel, observing that Henry's victory seemed to symbolize the culmination of his ambitions to vanquish his foremost adversary, establish peace across his domains, and secure a prosperous future for his rightful heir, William Adelin. In that moment, it appeared that Henry had achieved all he had ever aspired to leave as his legacy. The battle not only sealed William Clito's defeat, but also extinguished any lingering hopes King Louis harbored of seeing him ascend to the title of Duke of Normandy. In a bid to find a peaceful resolution and secure his own son's future, Louis reluctantly agreed to formally recognize William Adelin as the rightful ruler of Normandy. However, William Clito remained undeterred, clinging to the dream of reclaiming his birthright. Desperate to sway his nephew's resolve, Henry contemplated a compromise, offering to release his father from captivity under the condition that they both embark on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, never to return. Yet Henry's fears of his elder brother's persistent claims as the firstborn son of the conqueror lingered, overshadowing any semblance of trust. Reluctant to relinquish his leverage, Henry attempted to appease William Clito by bestowing upon him the title of Earl over 3 counties of England. However, William Clito staunchly refused to renounce his claim to the ducal throne of Normandy, steadfastly asserting his belief that either he or his father was the rightful heir. Thus, the specter of familiar discord and dynastic rivalry continued to loom large, casting a shadow over the tenuous peace that had momentarily settled over the realm. In a bid to challenge Henry's actions and seek justice for his nephew William Clito, King Louis turned to the highest authority in Christendom, the Pope. Asserting that Henry's treatment of his elder brother and nephew ran counter to Christian principles, William Clito and King Louis made their case before Pope Calactus, who happened to be in nearby Reims in 1119 to address matters concerning Emperor Henry V, Matilda's husband. Accompanied by William, King Louis presented a passionate appeal to the Pope within the solemn confines of Reims Cathedral. Standing before the papal throne at the cathedral's main entrance, Louis's commanding presence and fervent rhetoric reverberated through the sacred space. With the support of numerous French princes and the formidable presence of William Clito, Louis vehemently accused Henry of England of territorial aggression, the seizure of Normandy, the imprisonment of its rightful duke, and the displacement of its legitimate heir. Despite attempts by Henry's supporters, including the archbishops of Rouen and Normandy, to interject on his behalf, their voices were drowned out by Louis's impassioned plea. This successful move by the French king, regardless of its immediate impact on young William's plight, marked a significant achievement in challenging Henry's authority. When Henry himself met with the Pope the following month on the Norman frontier, he could only express his grievances and reiterate his offer to William Clito to treat him as a son and bestow upon him suitable lands and honors. However, William remained steadfast, rejecting the offer outright. In the face of William's resolve and the limitations of papal intervention, there was little more the Pope could do to alleviate his plight. As the pontiff patiently deliberated, it seemed that divine intervention was at play in favor of William Clito within a year of the Council of Reims. Catherine Hanley vividly describes the scene on the afternoon of November 25, 1120, telling us that Henry found himself in Barfleur, a bustling Norman port, surrounded by his household and a host of English and Norman nobles. They were preparing to embark on a voyage to England under the evening tide when an intriguing offer presented itself. Thomas Fitzstephen, the captain of a newly refurbished vessel christened the White Ship, approached Henry with an offer of passage. With pride, Thomas recounted how his father had piloted William the Conqueror's ship across the English Channel in 1066, and expressed his deep honor in conveying the son of the famed conqueror. Although Henry had already made arrangements for his own passage, he noted the enthusiasm among the young courtiers for the opportunity to travel aboard such a splendid vessel. Recognizing the allure of the White Ship, Henry acquiesced to Thomas's proposal, allowing him to transport a contingent of passengers, including his sons William Adelin and Richard Fitzroy, his illegitimate daughter Matilda, his nephew Stephen of Blois, the Count of Mortain, his niece Matilda of Blois, sister of Stephen, and her husband Richard, Earl of Chester. All in all, the ship carried around 300 passengers and crew members, promising a voyage of excitement and anticipation. The scene was set. The heir to the throne, a spirited 17-year-old, surrounded by his closest companions and eager followers, embarked on the White Ship, where copious amounts of alcohol flowed freely. What could possibly go wrong? To those unfamiliar with the nuances of sailing, the English Channel may appear deceptively benign. At its narrowest point, it spans a mere 21 miles and has been traversed by talented amateur athletes through feats of endurance swimming. However, this seemingly innocuous stretch of water connecting the Atlantic Ocean to the North Sea has played a pivotal role in shaping English history and safeguarding its shores. Throughout the annals of time, the English Channel has served as a bulwark of security for England, thwarting invasion attempts and preserving its sovereignty. It proved instrumental in the defeat of the formidable Spanish Armada and served as a formidable barrier against the ambitions of Napoleon and Hitler. With its powerful tidal currents and unpredictable weather patterns, the Channel poses a formidable challenge to sailors, earning its reputation as a treacherous waterway. Reflecting on the strategic significance of this maritime divide, Frenchman Jean-Louis Broca aptly observed, "Nature has placed England and France in a geographical location which must necessarily set up an eternal rivalry between them." Indeed, the Channel's unique characteristics have perpetuated a historical rivalry between the two nations, shaping the course of European history for centuries to come. Different ports along the English Channel present varying levels of difficulty for crossing. Barfleur, described by Spencer as one of the most picturesque villages in France, served as a bustling hub for maritime travel between Normandy and England. It was a crucial stopping point, particularly for journeys to Southampton, serving as a vital link between the two realms. Over the centuries, monarch and nobles shuttled back and forth across the Channel, navigating its waters with varying degrees of ease and difficulty. Despite its idyllic appearance, Barfleur's coastal waters pose significant challenges for even the most experienced sailors. According to the group Normandy, then and now, the area is infamous for its strong currents, treacherous rocks, and fast tidal streams, making it a perpetual challenge for seafarers. As chronicler Orderic Vitalis recounts, William Adelin, in a gesture of celebration and camaraderie, approved a generous allocation of 3 mauds of drink for everyone on board the White Ship. The quantity of alcohol provided, estimated to be between 260 and 608 liters depending on the location, was substantial and would have equated to multiple bottles of wine per passenger at the lower end. It is believed that the captain and crew, honored to have been entrusted with the heir to the throne, likely joined in the pre-sailing festivities, unaware of the tragic turn of events that awaited them on that fateful voyage. They lingered at the port for many hours, immersed in festivities and revelry that stretched late into the night. But as the hours passed and the revelers grew increasingly restless, the raucous group aboard the White Ship began to clamor for departure, urging the captain to hasten their journey to catch up with the king's ship. Of course, the king had departed earlier in the evening, while there was still ample light to guide their passage through the treacherous waters. However, as the White Ship finally left the safety of the harbor, it sailed forth into the darkness of a moonless night, with scant wind to fill its sails for what was expected to be a 10 to 12-hour journey. Despite the late hour and the dimly lit sky, the jubilant passengers aboard the White Ship paid little heed to the traditional maritime rituals. Rather than waiting for the priest to conclude their blessings and prayers for a safe voyage, the intoxicated soldiers impatiently dismissed them, eager to take their places and set out on their journey without delay. Adults can always look back at times where we made the right decision. Those times that we were able to recognize that our friend was about to make a drunken mistake and we managed to intervene. Stephen of Blois took his leave right before the ship was about to sail, just before midnight on November 25th. The king's nephew later claimed that the rough sea was doing a number on his stomach and departed from the doomed vessel. Historian Charles Spencer writes that by the time the white ship took to sea, the majority of those on board were much the worse for wear, including the helmsman. The cry went up to try to overtake the king's vessel, and the oarsmen bent their backs in an attempt to please the prince and his Bane entourage. The sail, which should only have been deployed once the white ship was clear of the rocky coast, was dropped prematurely. The voyage was chaotic from the start and proceeded at dangerous speed. The unblessed ship hadn't even made it out of the harbor when it smashed into a rock that was resting just beneath the surface. A half-mile into the crossing, while traveling at exhilarating speeds under a silver moon, the proud prince and his knights must have felt invincible. Then an appalling sound rent the air as the port side of the ship was caught on Quobouf's leaf. In seconds, the ship had capsized. Hanley writes that everything now happened very quickly. The planking of the ship's hull was stove in. Water came gushing through. The ship capsized. Those on deck were thrown into the cold sea, while those lodging beneath were trapped by the rapidly rising water. The women stood virtually no chance of survival, dragged down by the weight of their long dresses and unable to swim, and they screamed as they were pulled under. Those in the harbor heard them, but could see nothing in the darkness. Some of the men fared better for a short while, but there was no possibility of a rescue effort from the shore, and they were too far out to swim back. Soon their desperate cries for help were also silenced as their thrashing ceased, and they slipped beneath the freezing waves. The temperature of the water in the channel averages between 50 to 59 degrees Fahrenheit during November. Experts believe that anything lower than 70 degrees significantly decreases one's chance of survival in a situation where they are stranded. Cold water robs the body of heat 32 times faster than cold air. The initial shock can cause a heart attack, disorientation, and severe pain. Within minutes of immersion, our hands and feet can become numb to the point of uselessness. Worse, the medieval Titanic, as the white ship has come to be known as, only had one lifeboat for what was between 150 and 300 people. There was only one survivor. Berold the Butcher somehow managed against all odds to cling to the wreckage through the long night. Historians suspect that the key to his survival was found in his profession's sheep and goatskin clothes, which could have kept him warm enough to survive the evening. Interestingly, the butcher was only present on the voyage to ensure that his earlier debts were collected from the prince. This royal party had racked up huge bills while fighting the French, and their departure across the channel meant that he likely would never see any of them again, and thus jumped on board at the last minute in order to keep on them about his unpaid wages. 3 curious fishermen, having come close to the wreck site to inspect the damage, pulled him from the water the next morning. Hanley informs us that there were later some stories in circulation, possibly put about by this same butcher, that William Adelin had survived by being put in a small boat, but that he turned it back upon hearing the shrieks of his half-sister, and was drowned when the boat was overwhelmed by others trying to save themselves. Also that Thomas Fitzstephen initially survived, but then chose to drown on learning of William Adelin's death to avoid the wrath of the king. But these are probably just fanciful tales, and in the case of the former meant to eulogize a lost youth. The heir to the throne perishing in an attempt to rescue a lady in distress, heedless of the risk to himself, made a far better story to be told and retold in the castles and on the street corners than the tale of the irresponsible and drunken youth whose actions contributed to 300 needless deaths, including his own. The king was informed of the tragedy while hunting in the New Forest, a preserve established by William the Conqueror. His son was scheduled to join them on the hunt. Instead, the royal family was greeted with the news that no parent ever wants to hear. The tragedy hit King Henry like a ton of bricks, for not only had he lost his beloved son, he had now introduced the question of succession to a land that had miraculously been at peace for nearly a decade. His prior decision to physically separate from his wife after the arrival of their son had seemed to have been an acceptable gamble at the time. Now England would be forced to pay a steep price in the coming years for the wager. The 19th century poem went so far as to claim that after hearing the news, Henry never smiled again. For sure, the man's grief was deep and profound. It likely did help, however, that every single member of the court surrounding him also shared in the loss of the White Ship disaster. Royal courts were tight-knit communities that remained separate from the rest of society. As many as 300 well-connected youth had tragically perished alongside the prince. Still, there were those who risked the court's wrath to preserve the details for the historical record, including the belief that the disaster had been an act of human error, or perhaps, even in the words of chronicler Henry of Hoffington, the glittering vengeance of God for their sins and extravagant lifestyles. He also noted that they perished without burial, so that death suddenly devoured those who had deserved it, although the sea was very calm and there was no wind. While the king likely never fully recovered from the loss, we do know that he quickly began to move forward in the interest of the kingdom. Hanley notes that thankfully there was no imminent danger of an Anglo-Saxon revival, as the Normans had held the throne of England for 54 years, and had so effectively replaced any Saxon in a position of rank with one of their own lords that there was nobody left to foment a rebellion. However, the Norman options to shore up succession were also lacking in merit. Matilda, the king's lone surviving child, was currently the empress of the Holy Roman Empire. She was also childless, which meant that he couldn't name a spare grandchild as his successor. Henry's stance remained resolute, with no inclination to reconcile with his elder brother, who now approaching his 70s remained imprisoned. This sentiment was evident in Henry's refusal to designate his brother's son, William Clito, as his heir, despite William being the king's closest surviving male relative. The church also played a pivotal role in the matter, steadfastly refusing to recognize any of the king's illegitimate offspring as legitimate heirs, despite some of them demonstrating remarkable governance skills in their English domains. In an era where the divine right of kings held sway, the church's refusal to sanction these offspring effectively wielded veto power in the contentious debate over succession. Henry sought to secure an alternative heir to his throne, turning his attention not to his nephew Theobald or Stephen of Blois, who had fortuitously disembarked the ill-fated White Ship just before its sinking, but to a replacement for his deceased son. With haste, he arranged a marriage to Adeliza of Leuven, a young woman of 18 years who, according to the medical beliefs of the time, was considered to be at her most fertile age. Her appeal to the king did not stem from a substantial dowry or political alliance. Rather, it seemed primarily driven by her availability and willingness to marry the 54-year-old monarch. Historian Elizabeth Chadwick writes that as Adeliza settled into life with Henry, he took her everywhere with him, probably in the hopes that she would become pregnant. Henry had used his first queen to act as regent when he was absent from England, but Adeliza never took up any kind of political role. This is logical and understandable, since by the time Henry married her, he had a very effective administrative system in operation, and a strong justiciar in the form of Roger, Bishop of Salisbury. Also, since Adeliza was only 18, unaccustomed to England and Normandy, and inexperienced, there was no point in putting her to rule. Her duty was to Henry and to future heirs. Yet despite the hopeful union, the much-desired pregnancy never materialized. This failure to produce an heir set the stage for the succession crisis that will take center stage in our next episode. The repercussions of the White Ship disaster will reverberate throughout England, casting a shadow over the kingdom's future and further complicating matters of succession. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to interact with the show, you can email us at resourcesbylowery@gmail.com or find us on the platform formerly known as Twitter. If you would like to financially support the show, please look in the show description for more information. As always, thank you for listening, rating the show, and spreading the word.